Hello all and welcome to my learning theory. Some of you may not be familiar with who I am. My name is Lisa Capacetti and I'm a pre-service teacher studying here at Swinburne. Psychologist John B. Watson famously stated, "Give me a dozen healthy infants, well-formed in my own specified world to bring them up in, and I'll guarantee to take anyone at random and train him to become any type of specialist I might select." He, among other men, became major players in contributing and developing behaviorism as a learning theory. It was in Watson's interest to uncover whether or not we had the ability to shape an individual's behavior solely by using learning techniques that are associated with their environment. With this in mind, behaviorism was formed to create a valid and scientific method in understanding human behavior. Through this video, I hope to justify their testaments by discussing the key features in this learning theory, analyze potential strengths and weaknesses that this provides to educators, and my own personal connection to this teaching pedagogy. It is my hope that after this presentation you are able to gather some insight as to why I feel this theory is the most relevant in my discipline and in my teaching beliefs. So behaviorism is the view that assumes a learner is passive, that only responds to environmental stimuli. According to Alberto and Troutman, behaviors seek to identify predictable relationships between environmental events and behavior. This theory mainly uses two processes to explain how people learn: classical conditioning and operant conditioning. In classical conditioning, people learn to associate two stimuli when they occur together, such that a response originally elicited by one stimulus is transferred to another. A classic example of this would be Watson and Rayner in 1920, who conditioned a young boy, little Albert, to respond with anxiety to the stimulus of a white rat. In operant conditioning, it is believed that behavior is shaped through positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement. Both positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement increase the probability that the antecedent behavior will happen again. In contrast, punishment, both positive and negative, decreases the likelihood that the antecedent behavior will happen again. Positive indicates the application of a stimulus, negative indicates the withholding of a stimulus. Learning is therefore defined as a change in the behavior in the learner. Classical conditioning only allows the person to produce existing responses to a new stimuli. Operant conditioning allows them to learn new responses. Lots of early behaviorist work was done with animals and generalized to humans. Originators and important contributors include John B. Watson, Ivan Pavlov, B.F. Skinner, E.L. Thorndike, who is linked with connectionism, and Albert Bandura. With the aid and research of these men, behaviorism as a learning theory evolved to be a concept that is prevalent in all levels of education. However, it is important to critique and evaluate this learning theory by looking at the strengths and weaknesses in order to understand its relevance in our teaching practices. Kremlinger and Huberty contend that the behavior allows educators to set up objectives that are clearly defined and unmistakable. Behaviorism stands apart as it is something that is observable. We're able to see whether or not a behavior has been learned, as we can see the learner put what they have learned into a real-life context by accomplishing certain tasks. Smith reiterates this as he follows on to say that the strength in this theory is that it rejects the concept of the unconscious and the internal mental state of a person. It does not subject professionals such as psychologists to make their own interpretation of how a learner thinks, as it is not observable. This, according to Salmon, then allows studies to be made that are very reliable. However, behaviorism is not without its flaws, as Cherry argues that it is a one-dimensional approach to understanding human behavior that takes very little into account and ignores the fact that learners are adaptable. For instance, not everything can be explained by outside influences. Individuals are capable of free will and are influenced internally by moods, thoughts, and feelings. Furthermore, Shervin and Dickman argue that behaviorism must accommodate itself to accepting the importance of what goes on inside the black box, as it ignores the cognitive process in the learning process. This makes it difficult for behaviorists to explain the impact of mental health on learners, as they cannot inspect a person's thoughts to clarify its existence. Regardless of this, behaviorism is practiced in all aspects of education. Educators witness students learn through practice, with some proving that practice does indeed make perfect. We can observe the reshaping of a learner's behavior through reinforcement and positive experiences. Parquet and Haas state that students work towards things that give them positive feelings, and thus avoid the behavior that are associated with the unpleasantness of a negative consequence. The overall goal of an educator practicing behaviorism is to observe a change in behavior that the learner attributes internally so they feel positive about learning. The role is mostly that of a supervisor, and they're able to create a series of steps in a programmed manner with a predefined end. To apply behaviorism, an educator must decide a behavior they would like students to exhibit, and thus decide on reinforcers and consequences to follow. So, how does this relate to my teaching beliefs? Well, I believe to teach effectively, students need to be motivated and engaged with the material. And when I reflect upon my entire academic life, behaviorism was practiced in all levels. With English being my discipline, the following examples all come from experiences that I have encountered studying the curriculum. I learned to become a better reader in primary school because my teacher developed a token economy that ran for the duration of the term. She had set up a classroom economy which was based on how many books we read and how well we behaved during our reading sessions. We would receive fake money in various amounts depending on the activity, and then have the ability to exchange the money for real-life products such as stationery. This gave me an incentive to work towards, and most importantly, it made me feel good about learning. If I exhibited the behavior my teacher wanted, I would be given a reward that was tangible. Therefore, I avoided activities that would then cause me to lose my reward, and towards the end of the year, the token economy system was gone, but I had developed a habit for reading. During high school, the practice of behaviorism was a lot subtler. My English teacher developed a lesson plan which we needed to finish at the end of every class, and our positive reinforcement came in the form of our grades. If I finished work well, I would be recognized for my achievement, and this became my incentive to continue to do well. Punishment also played a major component. If we were late to class, failed to submit work, or was disruptive, teachers would exhibit positive punishment at which we would be scolded in class, and negative punishment by not being allowed to pursue our extracurricular activities. In my case, I was once scolded for distracting my classmates and thus threatened to not be allowed to join my English class to a play. I believe that behaviorism really is the best foundational approach to learning. It allows educators to introduce learners to a positive environment with a defined and reachable goal. They're able to monitor whether or not their desired behavior has been achieved and enforce a punishment and reward system when necessary. Although cognitivism and constructivism are great learning theories that some students and educators may connect more to, I feel it's important to highlight that not all students learn the same, and not all educators teach the same. I've practiced and have seen behaviorism executed well, so I have a sense of familiarity with it. To me, learning involves a contextualization of the knowledge, and through practice, behaviorism accomplishes this. So I'd like to end this presentation by going and reviewing Watson's quote on behaviorism once more. Though it could be considered to some as far-fetched, it is my hope that through my presentation I have given you an insight on the science and application of this learning theory. We can understand through his statement that there are possible scientific methods in modifying an individual's behavior through their environment, with the use of reinforcement and punishment, and this has been evident through major case studies such as Pavlov and his dogs, and Watson himself through little Albert. However, what Watson failed to take into account was an individual's free will, and are individuals with thoughts and emotions. Regardless of its potential weaknesses, we can understand as future educators that this is a fundamental approach to learning that is practiced in all levels of schooling. It allows both educators and students to reach a defined goal, and they can both observe and recognize when it has been achieved. Can we shape an individual solely through the environment? Perhaps, perhaps not. But it is important to acknowledge that this theory plays a crucial part in creating a positive and foundational way to learning. Thank you for taking your time to listen to me, and I hope you've gained some insight into behaviorism.